Welcome to the Spectre Creative Channel with me, your host, Scott, ToyGuru Neitlich. I've been in the toy industry as a professional for over 20 years. I'm also a toy collector, and I'm also a game enthusiast. I haven't really done many videos about board games. And if there's one board game I love more than any, it's Monopoly. And I'm sure I'm not the only one because it's pretty much America's #1 selling board game. Maybe Scrabble's up there too, but I don't know. I don't have the MPD numbers in front of me. Either way, it's pretty obvious that Monopoly, if not the #1, is an extremely popular game. And it has been for decades. I mean, literally almost a century now. We're almost to the 100th anniversary of the birth of the game. And we all know that there isn't just one version. In the last 20 years or so, there have been countless versions of licensed, different, aesthetics of Monopoly, with different characters put on them. But they're all played the same way as the original. The rules don't change. They just have, different themed tokens or different themed lands, taking away from the Atlantic Boardwalk original names for the lands or the properties. Now, I love Monopoly so much that I actually bet my college girlfriend that I could beat her in Monopoly in 20 minutes in order to get my first date with her. And no, this is not a picture of her. I just Googled the word first date and got an image. And yes, I did. That is actually how I got my first date with my college girlfriend. I did beat her in 20 minutes. And one of the reasons I'm really good at Monopoly is because I follow the rules and I know the math. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. Because a lot of the things you know about Monopoly and the way you play Monopoly, well, quite frankly, are wrong. What we're taught about the history of the game and even the way most people play the game do not follow the actual instructions that come with the game. People don't bother to read them. They just kind of learn the game as they go from their older siblings and cousins. Now, most people know that Monopoly started off in the 1930s as a game that was supposed to represent the way of looking ahead from the Great Depression, if you will. And most people, including Hasbro, credit the inventor of Monopoly to Charles Darrow, who is said to have invented the game in the mid-early 1930s and sold it to Parker Brothers. Well, this is not quite the right story, and as we all know, history is often wrong, especially as new information comes to light. There is no doubt that Darrow did bring it to Parker Brothers and made a lot of money off of the game and a lot of royalties over the years, but he's not the one who originated the concept of Monopoly. He may have renamed it and he may have changed some of the colors and some of the layout and aesthetics, but the basic concept of Monopoly, not even close to being the game that Charles Darrow sold to Parker Brothers in 1935. And it's not like this information is exactly top secret, but it also hasn't really risen to the top in pop culture, especially even in recent decades when everything about equality and even female empowerment tends to be one of the big pushes in the toy industry. Hasbro has recognized her, though, and the person I'm talking about is Lizzy Magie, who's pictured here. And Hasbro absolutely, especially in the women's edition of Monopoly that came out recently, they've finally credited her as the originator of the concept. And essentially, in 1903, Lizzy created a game which eventually became called the Landlord game. And she even published it. She even actually had it professionally made. Her idea was this game, which was a combination of properties and houses and deeds, was a way to teach people about essentially real estate and help them learn how they could get ahead in life. And it was very, very popular, especially on college campuses, especially some of the more liberal college campuses. And a lot of the handmade versions that she originally created were played in clubs and in economic classes, and they were even used as teaching tools in colleges. And this was really her intent. That's why she created the game. She thought it would be a great teaching tool. And as you can see, her original concept looks very much like what a Monopoly board is. And she hoped that, this game would go on and help people, but unfortunately, she didn't bring it to the right people at the right time. So while she had a great idea for a landlord property lease-based game, if you will, where players exchange money, move tokens around on a board, her idea was sort of, well, not sort of, it was reworked and refashioned by Charles Darrow after he learned about the game from her at a cocktail party at her house. She basically explained the game to Charles, and he asked her if he could have written instructions, which she'd never done before. She never wrote down how to play it. It was just in her head. And she thought it was very odd that he was asking for an actual copy of written instructions. He then drew up his own version of the game, and to try to differentiate it, his first board was actually circular, where it could be at least visually look different from the square board that Lizzy had created. But whether a circle or a square, he renamed the landlord game Monopoly, packaged it up, used all of the Atlantic City-based street names, which is where all the properties come from. They're all named after streets in Atlantic City, and shipped it off to Barker Brothers, where he went on to make royalties and basically a lifetime of payments for him and his heirs. And that happened for decades and decades and decades. And Lizzy has only been recognized really in the last 5 to 10 years as the originator of Monopoly. And when she passed away in the 40s, she verbally was very upset about this. And one of the reasons that Darrow remained the credited inventor of Monopoly for so long is it just made a good story, coming up from the Depression. All right, so besides the history of Monopoly, which most folks get a little wrong, really I wanted to talk about the fact that, well, most of you are probably playing the game wrong, and let me explain why. So the fundamentals of Monopoly is that it is a well-oiled machine, meaning there is very much a structure from everything from how much money is on the playing field or in the bank, how many houses and hotels exist, even to the number of chance and community chest cards that are in rotation. All of this is very much tied into percentages and the math of Monopoly. And the things that throw it off the most are, I guess, what you could call house rules. So things like free parking, or people also like to reward things like snake eyes. When you roll that, it's very common to have what's called a house rule, which is a made-up rule that's not in the official Monopoly rulebook, and added by individual players. So a common thing is to give people $1,000 every time they land on free parking or snake eyes. The problem with this is it's an artificial injection of money into the game that throws off all of the math. The more money in play, the longer it takes to play the game. So as an example, free parking, while people like to use this as a way to get $1,000, it actually means absolutely nothing. Free parking is just a free spot where nothing happens at all. It's just a place to rest. But because of the absence of anything happening on this square, players over the years have changed that. Another big rule that most players don't pay attention to or even aware of is the Monopoly auctions. Now you see this always popping up in the Monopoly video games. For example, this is the old 8-bit Nintendo video game for Monopoly, which I loved because it was so much fun to play against the computer because the computer didn't cheat and it always played all the rules. And believe me, it's there. Go take a look at the Monopoly rulebook. Auctions are a huge part of the game and are put there in order to help get the properties out there quicker. And again, you'll see this in almost every video game version of Monopoly because it's a core part of how the game is played. Essentially, if you land on a property that is not improved, meaning it is not owned and it doesn't yet have houses or hotels on it, if you choose not to purchase it, well, immediately it goes up for auction. So you have your choice. You can buy it, or other players have the chance to buy it. And the idea is that this gets the properties owned very quickly, and it's a way for people to get the properties at less than face value. Usually the banker or one of the other players will be the auctioneer, and everyone else can bid. Another thing that people tend to misrepresent about playing Monopoly is they think of the most expensive properties as being the best. That the more expensive they are, the better they are, and the more money I can get back from them when people land on my properties. Well, this isn't really true. This is actually a fallacy that people have believed, really, with the whole Park Place and Boardwalk being symbolic of kind of the rich, monopoly winner, because you can improve them so much that you're bringing in $1,500 to $2,000 when someone lands on that property. The dark blues, they call them. But the thing is, you only mathematically have a 27% chance of landing on the dark blues every time you go around the board. Boardwalk and Park Place are two of the least landed on properties. Comparatively, the oranges, New York, Tennessee, and St. James, which are located on the bottom of the board next to free parking and after jail, they're the most landed on properties in the entire game. You have a 50% chance of landing on them every single time you go around the board. Part of this is because of their proximity to jail, because people get sent to jail quite a lot in the game, and when you have two dice that each have 6 possible outcomes, your chance of moving into the oranges from winding up in jail is very high, which is why owning the oranges is a much better way of producing rent money than buying something like the greens or the dark blues, which are more expensive. It's not about the cost, it's about the percentage of landing on them. Another misunderstood rule, and one that isn't played up too much, is improving properties with houses and hotels. Now, at first glance, it seems like this is very expensive because you have to fork over more money to put up more improvements onto your property. But the thing is, every time you build up, you're obviously getting more rent. But it's not as simple as that. What's really important about hotels and houses is how few there are in the game. So, for example, there are 12 hotels and 32 houses. No more, no less. And if you look at a deed for a property, any deed, you will notice that the jump between 1 and 2 houses and then 3 houses is very significant. It's much more of an increase in rent than it is between any of the other 2 improvements. When you go from 2 to 3, you're usually jumping up several $100s, versus between any of the other scales, you're only moving up a little bit, maybe $100, maybe even less than that. So getting 3 houses onto a property quickly is one of the best ways to improve it. But, as I said before, there's only 12 hotels and 32 houses. Why is this important? Well, it's all about demand and supply. While there's a common house rule that says you could buy as many houses as you want, this actually goes against the monopoly rules. So every time you buy a hotel, which then returns 4 houses to sort of the house hotel bank, you're increasing the number of available houses. You can purposefully create a housing or hotel shortage by essentially building up houses and not upgrading to a hotel. If there aren't any more houses to buy, your opponents can't buy houses. So it's all about math. You can create a lack of houses and deny your opponents the ability to improve their properties by owning them all. So really, at the end of the day, it's all about what's in play on the field. How much money is there? The more money on the field, the longer the game is going to take. Knowing the percentage opportunity to land on each property is extremely important, especially when deciding which properties to buy. There are properties like the oranges that have a much higher percentage of landing versus things like the dark blues. And then, of course, knowing how to manage resources. There's a finite number of houses and hotels, and if you can own them all, or you can keep your opponents from having the ability to improve their properties. Okay, obviously Monopoly is meant to be played for fun, and you can tell that I take it very seriously, and that's why a lot of people won't play against me. But hey, if you want to follow all the rules, you'll see that it's a lot more about skill and less about luck than you might take Monopoly for. Knowing how to manipulate resources and understand how much money is in play can really improve your ability to win. And of course, today it's not only just about winning, even cheating at Monopoly has been embraced by Hasbro with their Cheaters Edition. So hey, As long as you're having fun, that's all that matters. But hey, I hope this video provided some insight into the history and rules you may not have known about. If you want to see more videos like this, let me know. Always love making more. Thank you for watching. Give it a like or a subscription, which helps you tell YouTube to share this with other people. That's what it's all about, sharing toy love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.